Okay, well, I have got her now. She is one of my favorite people to talk to on the podcast, and she's joined me many times in the last 2 years and then before. A long history with SE Cupp, and we're very happy to have you. Thank you for joining me again.
Always. Thank you for having me.
Lots of really important and serious issues to talk about, but we do have to get this kind of elephant literally in the room out of the way. You were on TV on CNN last week, and I don't know if this is the first time, but a lot of people were reacting about a photograph in your home. You're in your home broadcasting, and it's on the wall, and you're showing us now for people who are watching. It seems to be a photo of, it's very big.
It is. I'll show you to scale. Like, it's a little far away from me, but
yeah.
Like, this is my hand on it.
Okay.
It's probably 4 feet by 5 feet. I mean, it's massive.
So it seems to be a photograph of Al Gore and two other young people playing outside is the best way to describe it. And
what's your question? I mean, and that's not weird.
It's the weirdest thing in the world. It would be weird for Al Gore to have that up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a great picture. It's an action photo of like somebody playing outside, and it's huge and it's on your wall. And I demand, and the public demands, that you explain this mysterious. Have you explained this ever before?
I have to people who have asked. I don't think I've done so publicly. But it's funny. Like, Room Raider?
Yes.
They've asked me about it. They haven't, and I told them what it was about. They didn't publish that, which is fine.
So I'm getting the exclusive?
I didn't know it was an exclusive. He DM'd me. He's like, "What is that about?" I told him, and apparently, like, he's holding on to it, which is very nice.
No, I'm saying I'm getting the exclusive. I'm putting this out. America, this is the most important thing in the country right now. Everybody's talking about it.
Other colleagues have texted me why is Al Gore behind you? I freely tell the story. I feel like, I don't know if we're building it up. The story's not that good, but there's a definite story. This isn't on my wall randomly. So here's the story. This picture, there's two parts. The first part of this story is this picture is from 2000. It is a couple days after the November presidential election. As you remember, the votes were still being counted and recounted. We did not have a president just because election day was over. Al Gore's camp told him to go outside his front lawn of the vice president's house with his kids and play flag football so as to appear confident. And of course, all anyone talked about when this picture finally came out in the New York Times was how staged it all looked. That is part one of the story. Part two of the story, I am working at the New York Times. And in the 8 years following 2000. And pictures like this that were newsy and in some cases Pulitzer winning are hang all over the old New York Times building. When we are planning to leave the New York Times building into the new building, which is the big building on 8th and Broadway now, they say to employees, take a picture. You can have one of these to take home. And someone from my department took a big A-Rod picture because they wanted, a A-Rod Yankees moment picture or whatever. And some other obviously big moments were taken. I took this because to me, it is a constant reminder that authenticity goes a long way in politics and in life. And I spent 8 years looking at this picture, thinking about that. And so it means something to me outside of what it depicts. And so that's why it's there. That's the story. Are you disappointed?
No, I'm angry.
Why?
Because I've thought about it so much, and if it's a great reason. I love what you just said, authenticity. But why not put it? Why do we have to see it And we don't know that that's what it means. And we're left. Do you know how much time I spent like guessing and speculating? Most of us settled on the conspiracy that one of the people in the photo was someone that you knew, and knew it wasn't your kid because it was, he's too old even now to be. But a lot of questions were asked, and I appreciate you clearing it up. But I wish I hadn't.
I'd get this out of you.
Huh?
You wish I'd get this out of you.
You know what I wish? I think that you should do me personally a favor. I would like you to put up a photo of me over your shoulder, which is, you can give it whatever, definition of reminder that you want, but it'll raise questions. It'll help promote my podcast.
Okay.
So why is there a bald guy with ink on his face? Just before I hit record, a pen blew up on my face and I didn't know it. And then SC was like, I think you're bleeding black. Anyway, well, let's jump out of that into, I think it's a good segue, actually, the idea of authenticity. You've been talking a lot about, and you wrote a great piece over at the New York Daily News, where, of course, you're a columnist, about kind of an issue of authenticity. And that is about these text messages that were sent to the former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, by several different people who were saying one thing privately and another thing publicly. You've been all over this issue, and I feel like that's exactly what you're talking about in terms of authenticity and why it matters. Why is this such a big issue to you? Why are you talking so much about this story? I mean, I agree with it. I just want to know your take.
Well, as always, thanks for reading my work. I really do appreciate that. I think you and authenticity comes up for me all the time in my business and life and politics. And I think you and I talked about this.
Yeah.
I think you were I know, I tweeted about it. I said a long time ago, a producer friend of mine told me, morning show producer said, the audience will always figure you out. And if you're pretending to be someone you're not, they will expose you and they won't forgive you. And he said this about another famous morning show anchor. And I think you tried to guess who and you did not get it. But
yeah, I still don't know who that was.
And this morning show anchor was one way on television and another way in life. And the producer said to me, you can be an asshole on TV as long as you're an asshole in real life.
Right.
If there's this dichotomy and you're found out, they'll never trust you again.
Right.
And so whether it's that milieu or talking about the people you and I know at Fox, who I know better, who say one thing to me privately and another thing publicly. And what these text messages to Mark Meadows revealed was that Sean and Laura and Brian and Don Jr. say one thing privately and a different thing publicly. And not only is that kind of inauthenticity gross and a lie, it's a charade. It's super, super dangerous when you're talking about stuff like, I don't know, COVID or a democratic election. When you're using kind of a performance and you're putting on a character to talk to people who want that character, but you're dressing it as news. Well, I think that's pretty much the worst thing you could do with a platform.
I agree, but it would seem that the person who argued or gave you that piece of advice, who might have been a hypocrite himself, it's not necessarily accurate given what we've seen now, because we have seen a duplicitousness. We've got the text messages, and maybe people haven't heard the juxtaposition between the two. Maybe they only heard one side of it, and obviously most likely the public side. But then you've got a situation like, I think it was Alex Jones, but it might have been Hannity too, where they were sued or someone else. And they said, in the lawsuit, how could anybody ever be taking me seriously? I'm an entertainer. And they got away with it. But people are taking them seriously. And my point, Essie, is even though it's found out now that they're saying something privately differently, publicly, it doesn't seem to be deteriorating their integrity or their reputation with their fans and viewers. Do you agree or disagree, or somewhere in between?
I completely agree, because what my producer was talking about from 40 years ago, 40 years ago. I mean, television audiences, America has changed. And I think, especially in this way that we're talking about, audiences aren't craving authenticity. They're craving um,
Hmm.
affirmation.
Yeah.
And they want someone who's going to affirm what they already believe or stoke their own inner grievances and fears and loathing. And whether they meet it or not almost doesn't matter. I mean, as you pointed out, it was Tucker's show where Fox's own lawyers said in defense of him, people do not take Tucker Carlson's show and what he says as fact. They take it as entertainment. A U.S. district judge agreed with that statement. So there is almost an expectation, and we had it with Donald Trump. We had that expectation. He doesn't really believe all this. Who knows? He's saying it to get elected. It's a put on. It's a character. It's a character. I mean, I think he believed a lot of what he did and said, but I also think, like flipping from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, he kind of went wherever he saw an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Americans have started accepting that. And so you're right. I don't think you're going to see this flight from Fox News hosts. I've seen it a little. I have friends in my family who used to watch religiously and can't anymore. It's too over the top. It's too doom and gloom. They know they don't believe it. And they've shut it all off. They didn't go anywhere else. They just shut it all off.
But then there's, who knows what the percentages are, how many, but then there's, a certain percentage that Fox News hasn't been extreme enough. And as Trump and others have been critical of it, push them over to other
Newsmax and OAN, right?
And, even worse, if it's possible, YouTube and, just even Joe Rogan now is so far out there on everything. Like, people just need to go even further because Fox isn't far enough. By the way, did you hear Tucker Carlson last week? I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this. He said that Alex Jones is a better journalist, more of a journalist than CBS News, Margaret Brennan, and some other corporate media person. I forget who it was. And then the week later, I heard that Alex Jones said the horrible tornadoes in Kentucky were potentially a Joe Biden weather weapon.
Well, it's not a serious statement to say that Alex Jones is a journalist, period, let alone a serious one. And forget comparing him to any actual journalist.
Right. Yeah.
But that's what Tucker's become. He's become kind of a troll dressed in newsman's clothing. And as much as we know not to take that seriously, because Fox's lawyers have told us not to take that seriously. I mean, that's how unserious it is. Certainly plenty of people do take that seriously, and it gets them angry. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It gets them angry enough to storm the Capitol. It gets them angry enough to not wear masks and go ahead and die of COVID. It gets them angry enough to hate their neighbors and call the police on Black and brown people. It gets them angry enough to do terrible things. And if you want to pretend you have nothing to do with that, or your hands are clean because you didn't go out and tell them to do that, well, that's a lie. That's a fallacy. And I don't know how people sleep at night knowing that that's going on.
Probably fine on a bed of money.
Oh, just fine. Just fine.
But I think you left out a word. It makes them afraid and then angry. Like, they're afraid of so many things that aren't happening.
Yes.
It's so sad. Also, the January 6th commission, with these text messages this week, and one of the other points being brought up is how a lot of these Republican congressmen, like Jim Jordan, they were all over the Benghazi issue, which is, 4 people. By the way, at worst, I don't remember the truth about it, but at worst, Hillary Clinton, they're saying, at worst, I think they're accusing her of saying stand down, which is far worse than what we saw. Trump basically took no inaction, right, on January 6th. But regardless, those comparisons, do you think, my question to you is, do you think this commission will come up with anything? Because if they don't, then it just, I think, deteriorates credibility with Congress and congressional committees similar to this, including, unfortunately, what happened with the impeachments. The credibility, I think they lose credibility, and it looks like a stunt. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, listen, I remember Benghazi well, and Benghazi was important. Benghazi was bad, and what the administration did, not just Hillary, but Susan Rice and Obama himself, blaming a false videotape at first. They did some pretty, I'll be generous and say inept things, because I don't think they meant to be duplicitous in the
Right.
beginning. They were certainly incompetent. And then later they were duplicitous. But I would be an idiot not to say that Republicans also made a performance of that investigation for years and years and years. An investigation I thought started out as very important and serious. Now,
And Hillary Clinton came and testified for 11 hours.
Hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Yes. And that was absolutely a tragedy and should never happen again. And so I would say now getting to the bottom of that was important. I think this investigation is as important, if not more important, because future elections are at stake. And we know far too little about what happened in the White House during those hours. And I'm hopeful that during the course of this investigation, we'll get some of those answers. Whether it leads to criminal prosecutions or not, I don't know. But I think it's important to have an official accounting of history. And when you have people in the Republican Party from Trump on down lying about the events of that day, well, it'd be great if we could have an official kind of accounting of what happened in a more complete way.
I always thought maybe Don Jr. was somehow more involved, and maybe he is, but I feel like his text messages saying, "Stop this is bad," kind of point to the fact that he wasn't in charge of the Secret Service trying to, whisk Mike Pence away. So they couldn't there was no, you would really have to be stupid to bring him in on anything, period, at all, outside of opening a new used car lot. And even then he'll show up with the wrong dealership. But I feel like he's almost vindicated on being implicated in any kind of larger plot, because he was like texting, "This looks bad. Stop it, Dad." And his dad didn't. He couldn't text his dad. He texted Mark Meadows. Anyway.
Well, I hear a lot of people saying that. We don't know that he didn't text his dad. I'm sure he did text his dad.
Good point.
But we don't know that. We don't have that record. And who knows what his dad said to him.
You think that Donald Trump gave his son his phone number? I think he gave him a burner.
Yes.
It's the Trump. It's the Don Jr. phone.
It's the burner number. Yeah. The fake phone number.
Please love me, Daddy. Anyway, yeah, I interrupted you with that joke. Sorry.
No, who knows if Don texted his dad? I'm assuming he did. But if he thought the quickest way to get to his dad, who was presidenting and maybe not looking at his phone, was to go to Mark Meadows. I don't begrudge that. I know that's a fun, sticky little detail. But the problem is, despite all of these texts to Mark Meadows, and Mark Meadows, if we believe him, saying that he was pressing hard for Trump to stop it, he did none of it. That, I think, is the most crucial part, whether taking his son's advice or Sean's advice or anyone, he didn't take any of it.
Right.
Didn't take any of it.
No, he was loving it. He wanted it to, he was rooting for it.
Yes.
What about Democrats? You wrote a piece at the New York Daily News. Democrats have to learn how to win. They think selling their accomplishments will keep Congress in 2022. We could talk about their accomplishments, but, I think it's a great piece because I wish it were wrong, but politics is perception. What have you done for me lately? And I might not connect the dots between the thing that you improved in my life and you doing it. So what's your advice? Well,
that last point is I think the most important one, that Democrats have done some stuff, and they're big things, passing an infrastructure bill, but it's stuff that you might not personally feel for years. So hanging your hat as a party on, accomplishments, I wish that was all it would take, but I don't think that's smart. And while I never suggest, parties play dirtier than they already do, Republicans are playing dirty. They're literally trying to stop people from voting.
Yeah.
And Democrats, I hear this all the time, this existential crisis in the party. Well, how do we cut through, the history of what will probably happen in 2022, which is that, the party out of party usually wins in the midterms. How do we cut through that? How do we sell our messaging? How do we compete with Republicans? Well, We just got to sell them on all the stuff we've done. And I want to slap people. I'm like, you are nuts if you think that is going to get people to the polls. You have to make people scared, because they should be, of all the shit Republicans are going to do and are doing now, didn't stop doing. That's going to undo your agenda, all the stuff you accomplished, which was really fun and cool. It's all going to be gone if they come in and take power back. And they're going to stop more people from voting. I mean, to me, they are right to instill fear in voters. I don't like fear mongering for the sake of it.
Right.
But get comfortable with fear mongering, because there's a lot of stuff to be afraid of that Democrats kind of don't want to talk about. They're like, well, let's leave that over there and focus on us and what we've done. And like, this isn't preschool. This isn't Montessori school. Get your hands dirty and win again, or else, Trump and his friends are going to take over the whole smash and dismantle democracy in a way they didn't get to the first time.
Yeah. And that is a bigger concern, too. I want to ask you a few more about that, but I know I got to let you go. And I want to ask you one more question. You have been sharing for, I guess, this summer is when you came out. Is that right? When you came out with.
Yes, I'm gay.
With I hear you're in a deep relationship with comedian Judy Gold. Is that out yet?
I adore her, and I wish that were true.
I know. Everybody does that knows her. At least. So
no, I did. I came out with my mental health struggle.
With your mental health struggle, and you being a well-known public person, that makes it a lot more impactful. I've said a lot of things throughout my career as a comedian and a broadcaster, and we've talked about this before. But the question I want to ask is, when you do that, I'm sure you then get a flood of people who I've asked you this before, but I want an update. Who can relate to you? Who, by the way, want to make you their therapist now? Oh, I had the same problem. What did you do? Yeah. But my question is, to not become more overwhelmed by complete strangers who are really well-meaning and thoughtful. How much have you been able to help other people? And also not being a therapist yourself. People are always asking me for advice. I'm like, listen, man, I don't know. I don't want to give you the wrong thing. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I'm here to listen. How have you been handling like people, complete strangers, viewers, followers on social media, people who know your work and who have heard and read about how open you've been, their kind of questions, their solicitations? How do you deal with it?
I'll be honest. I can't think of a time where I really have been bothered by that, or I haven't wanted to talk about it, or I haven't wanted to hear
great
advice or questions. I'm real comfortable talking about it. It feels good for me to talk about it and hear from other people about it. I don't want to be a therapist, and I don't want to just be giving people advice, and I'm real careful with the advice that I give. But it's cathartic for me to talk about it and not have to hide it, or be ashamed of it. I'm not. And what's been so great is I hear from all kinds of people. In the wake of it, I heard from Naomi Osaka, who wanted to talk about mental health, and we worked on a piece together. And well, that was great. But I also hear from friends and family and colleagues. Today, I sat down with a colleague. We were just going to have coffee, and it turned into a discussion of our mental health, because this colleague had also been going through some mental health stuff, and obviously didn't even hesitate to share the story because I had already shared mine. So it was immediately a safe space. We didn't have to introduce the topic. Are you okay with this? Can we talk about this?
Right.
It was immediate, let's talk about our mental health, which was
permission.
A little jarring, but at the same time, this is what I'm doing it for. So that there's no stigma around it, so that in a normal conversation, you and I could just be, BSing, and I can just drop into my therapist said, or I was talking to my therapist, or I had a really bad day yesterday, without it being an earth-shattering revelation or something uncomfortable for me. Right. So that's been really great to see. And I'll let you know when I get tired of it, when I want to stop talking about my mental health. I'm not there yet. For me, it still feels really helpful and good to do that.
Great. I know it can be overwhelming when you put yourself out there sometimes, especially when you're very well known. I mean, it's a matter of literally, without blowing smoke up anybody's ass, how many people know you and have access to you the way we do to people on social media, or at least think they do. So it can be tough, but I'm so glad that you're continuing and talking about it everywhere, and I appreciate you always talking about it with me. You should be ashamed of one thing, that is the Al Gore picture that you have really confused a lot of people without that story. SE Cupp, thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure, and thanks for letting me get that story off my chest.
Yes, you got it.